Hello and welcome to this video about tie-on pockets. I recently bought the book The Pocket, A Hidden History of Women's Lives. Its arrival was very well timed, as I'm up to editing the footage of sewing my Arcadian Shepherdess pair of pockets. Tie-on pockets were commonly used from the 17th to late 19th century. Clothing often didn't have the sort of built-in pockets that we think of, so people wore these tie-on pockets either singly or in pairs. They were often plain linen or cotton, but they were also embroidered or decorated with applique, made out of patchwork or fine silk. They were worn around the waist, attached by ties, and had a slit to access the contents. They could be worn as an outer layer for quick access, particularly useful when selling wares, or could be worn underneath your petticoats to be more concealed and private. I'm going to start by showing you how I made my pockets, and then come back and discuss the book.
I made my 1780s stays out of a beautiful gold and ivory brocade. When cutting out my stays, I had some fabric left over, and I realized that would be perfect for making a pair of pockets. To get a feel for what I wanted, I tied my older red pockets onto Madame over my Arcadian Shepherdess underthings. I decided that I wanted them a little bit longer and rounded. After selecting the desired parts of the fabric to get the swirl where I wanted it, and cutting the pockets out, the first thing I did was insert the pocket openings. I don't have footage of the real ones, so will momentarily show you the process on a sample. The first step is to draw a line where you want the pocket opening to be.
Okay. And we have our bias binding, and I'm just going to pin it in a couple of places. So just start a few pins at the top to get it started, and then we'll manipulate the rest by hand when we're at the sewing machine.
Sew along the fold line, removing pins as you go. Then carefully rotating around the bottom, stopping and adjusting as often as necessary. Once attached, we can snip off the end of the bias binding, as we now know how much was needed. We can see the bias binding is now sewn down, and we turn it around, ready to cut along that opening.
Either side of this line, chopping out a little bit. Go in here. Chopping around there. Okay, from there we'll check when that folds over. and that folds over. Yep, we can cover that line of stitches with the double layer. So that looks good. Let's do that. Okay, so we've got this one.
Stitch in the ditch to sew down the bias binding.
Okay, so here we are with the pins in. Let's take them out. Okay, so this is what they look like so far, and it is really quite nice and round. Here has now been pressed. You can see we've stitched in the ditch all the way around, and from the back, this is what that looks like. We've caught down the edge all the way around, and it's formed a nice round loop, which is lovely. It's a little bit scrunched and gathered there. That's okay, there's not much you can do about that. You can try and do it more. If you tried to do it with corners, you could have mitered corners, but I'm okay with this. It presses down fine.
So now we're back to the real pockets, which have the pocket opening sewn and the curve for the bottom stitch line drawn. I did French seams on these, but upon reading the book realised I had included more doubling up than was necessary, as we shall see. Both pockets were then sewn, wrong sides together, along that outside line of the pocket. The one on the right has also been trimmed and had notches cut. Then the pockets were turned inside out, right sides together, and sewn, with a 10mm seam allowance where there is a French seam, and 7mm when it is just on the fold. If I had started right sides together and used an even seam allowance, this would then be done, with the stitching visible around the edges on the outside, but I had automatically aimed for the seam to be on the inside, as we see on the right. The tops were trimmed straight and neat. The fronts and backs of each pocket were pleated at the top, and the pocket openings overlapped and pinned down. They were then pinned onto the waistband, the spacing simply done by aligning the middle of each pocket with that of the red pair. The waist tape was secured with 2 lines of stitches. The final step is to bind the top edge with blanket binding, using a similar process to the bias binding that we put around the pocket opening. And just pinning it down so this is along the same line, and then also just on that side. The blanket binding is then folded over, pinned in place, and top stitched. And with that, the pockets are complete. And here we have them, my finished pockets. I'm really happy with how they came out. I can put things in them, move my hands around. So now let's get on to the book review. The Pocket, A Hidden History of Women's Lives, by Barbara Burman and Ariane Fennetaux. So firstly, what I expected going in was that this book would have lots of pictures of pockets, with lots of descriptions and some context and social history about them as well. What I found was that while there really are many beautiful pictures, the emphasis was more on the social history. The authors used this object, the pocket, as a lens through which to examine the lives and context of women in Britain from the late 17th to late 19th century. It is about so much more than pockets. Before starting the book, in my mind, pockets belonged to the 18th century and before. I was surprised to learn that pockets continued to be used throughout the Regency period and beyond, and they sometimes got longer to accommodate the higher waistlines. They were not considered a fancy item, but just a standard everyday part of life. They were certainly not as fashionable as the reticule, or ridicule as they were sometimes called, but they were considered far more practical. I was very excited to see the example they have on page 41 of what they describe as a woman's quilted silk waist with a matching pair of pockets. It's quite a similar idea to what I did, matching my pockets to my stays. It should be noted that I found the book quite heavy to read in places, written in a very scholarly style. If you are hoping to find a catalogue of different pockets with style and construction information all clearly laid out together, then you're out of luck. Chapter 2 does focus on making and getting pockets, but ultimately the information is dispersed throughout the book. Furthermore, you can get a bit lost. It's hard to flick through and know what that page is about. Chapter names are not printed on each page and are not completely clear anyway. But time for more positives. There are many beautiful pictures of wonderful pockets throughout this book, with very clear references. It is full of very interesting social history. It is remarkably well researched and supported by evidence. And I do want to clarify, it does have many specific examples, pictures and descriptions of various types of pocket construction, but is not laid out with the purpose of a guide to reconstructing one's own. Pockets ranged from simple and sturdy to elaborately embroidered and decorated. And apparently there was a particular trend in Wales
to embroider your name onto your pocket. In conclusion, there is a lot of very interesting information in this book, and I enjoyed it very much. Overall, I give it a rating of 4.5 out of 5 stars, as I do think it could be a little easier to navigate. Please let me know in the comments if you have read The Pocket and what you thought of it. Did you have a favourite pocket that you are now inspired to make? Also, if you have made your own pair of pockets, I'd love to hear how you find them and what stylistic choices you made. If you enjoyed this video, please consider clicking the like button and subscribing. Thank you for watching. I hope you will join me next time. Goodbye.